Okay, Ms. Mastretti, we're going to go ahead and go over the initial observation I did the other day
Okay.
on the Romeo and Juliet, Act 4, Scene 3,
Okay.
and your guided notes that you had your students go through.
Okay.
So, first of all, what I'd like to ask you is, how do you think that the lesson went?
With Act 4, Scene 3, the context itself and what we were reading is interesting, and so the kids were getting to the point where they're starting to see the ends in sight, and so they're starting to get excited about Romeo and Juliet, which takes forever. But they're starting to see how plans are working, how they're not working, how this original setup is being changed, and so now it's kind of caught their interest of like, before it was, two teenagers that they don't really know randomly falling in love after knowing each other for a day, and now it's like they had all this plan set up, and now they're seeing how those plans are shifting and changing and those sorts of things. So they were a little bit more engaged than I originally expected. Notes went fine. They got through those okay, and then taking the test at the end worked out really well for most of them. A couple did not so well, but
Okay. All right, because what I saw in the class from my observation is I saw how you engaged the students, which was good because you got them thinking ahead of time with the question you asked them. Have you ever had your plans changed or plans that did not work out? So that was good because it got them going into that part which you just spoke about, which plans working or not working. The other part is, let's see, the objectives were lined out, lines were listed on the board, which helped the students stay on task so they knew who was going to be reading and what they were going to be reading that day, which is helpful. Instead of they go, who's reading, who's up now? So
I'm just as forgetful as they are. So it's if I don't have it written down, I don't pay attention to it, and then they also don't pay attention to it. And to be fair, there are still some times where they know they're reading their parts, and we still have to be like, psst, that's you, and they, we nudge them and they get their attention. We're like, sorry, and they can get through it and things. But having it that way, I've come to realize I have a master list on my desk that I keep on a clipboard. So even if the kids aren't there, I know the actors that are coming up. So if I'm, Romeo a lot or Juliet has big long speeches, and I can kind of like walk over and be like, you're up next, because I can see they're not paying attention or whatever. So it helps out that way to know that piece of it, but it really keeps them on top of it, on task, when they can see, okay, I have to read this many times, this is my part, because you'll see them, especially when we're picking new characters, they'll like flip through, like, that one has really long, I don't want to read, that one has a lot, and so they know right away.
Yeah. I've done that in the past too, where I've had them, I say, here's the deal, they're listed up in order, I'm gonna draw your names out, whatever you get.
Yeah.
I said, no trading, so that's good. And the other thing that I saw you do is, at least I think this is what I saw you do, is when it came close to somebody's line, it's like you walked over closer to that student. It was a proximity thing, so that I think that kind of prompted them that they were going to be coming up soon.
It depends on the students. A couple of mine, I usually take volunteers. When I don't get volunteers, then they have the cup with their name on them, and I pull sticks with their names on them, and they get to choose from there what characters they want. And so a lot of times the ones that get chosen are the ones who don't volunteer. They don't really pay attention, and so I've noticed that me going over and being like, you're almost done, they'll like get back focused and they can find where they're at, and so it's not as much of a delay when it comes to picking up that part.
Okay.
Sometimes I've noticed they're, you can see them playing on their device, and then the book's open, but they're playing on their device, and we have to wait for them to find where they are, and their classmates are like, they're right here. So having it that way is kind of nice. A lot of times I subconsciously do it. There's a few where I'll walk over and be like, you're up next, and those sorts of things. But a lot of times I just walk around and see and make sure that they're trying to stay on task.
Okay, no, that was good. That's the part when I saw when you had it listed on the board and then you were walking around with your proximity, making sure that they were, I think that kind of prompted them again, like I said, so that they knew they were, hey, it must be coming up because she's getting closer to me type thing.
Well, it's nice to have this. I use the No Fair Shakespeare version, which there are some things that are different from the textbook to what I have on my computer, but they're not reading it off my computer. They're reading it from the book. So I know what it's supposed to say, whereas they wouldn't have it been the other way around. Okay. So I can tell and keep track of where they are walking around the classroom. I really like that opportunity of it, because I can carry around the textbook, but it is a pretty big textbook.
Yeah,
I don't really want
it
to.
gets to become a pain, I agree.
Yeah.
So I guess I misunderstood that when I taught you too, because the No Fear Shakespeare is only for your use, the students
Some of
don't
the
have
kids,
it?
the kids have access to it.
Okay.
They know about it. I had 2 students in the class that you were observing. They used No Fear Shakespeare instead of the textbook.
Okay,
They like technology. They want to use it all the time, which is fine. They'd rather use that than the textbook. So 2 of them used the No Fear Shakespeare version, which it doesn't really bother me. Those 2 are pretty much self-starters. They like to have that opportunity to where they're not asking me 80 questions about what's happening. They can read it on this
They
side.
can follow.
No, this is what's going
it'll
on.
follow along a little easier. No, and I
Right.
thought that was good because it helped everything stay
Right.
on track and get everything done. So
Yeah.
that part was good. The next part is creating and maintaining effective environments for student learning. So some of this is going to be a repetition because
Yeah.
of the way this is set up, but promoting your social development. I put, like I said, use proximity to provide students assistance when needed also. So not only as a prompt that maybe their lines were coming up, but if they had a question, you were close to them so you didn't have to rush over, yell across the room, any of those types of things. Learning environment was neat and clean. And also the other thing that I liked is since that day was a dress up day, you had the bell schedule on the wall, so that, or on the board, I should say, so that they would know
Yeah.
class is going to be ending at this time. So it wasn't a surprise. Well, we're not supposed to get out till this time, or we're supposed to get out earlier. So
Right.
it helped with that part. I think that was good too.
It helps, especially my first period, when they're coming in and not knowing what's going on. Having that on the board really gets them a little bit more focused, and it also stops me from having to answer the same question. By the time 3rd period came around, when you came in to do the observation, they knew that things were a little bit different. Not only was I dressed differently, but they knew that it was already a different schedule that day, but they also want to know when they're going to have lunch because
Right.
they're starving by the end of the class period. So having it up there automatically, as soon as anybody starts looking at it, I'm like, okay, notice the schedule. It's a little bit different. We still have a lot to cover. We still have enough time to do all of these things, but we are going to be out a little bit different because a lot of times, it doesn't really matter what class period, but a lot of times they start packing up. They can feel that like 5-minute itch to pack up, and it's like, no, that would be the normal 5 minutes, but we don't have that anymore. So you're still on my time. So
Yeah.
they know better when it's on the board to see, okay,
It
this
does.
is
It
this is
keeps
what's
them,
going on.
yeah, it keeps them more on track of where you're supposed to be going.
So I've almost even thought about doing it just every day for a regular schedule, having it somewhere posted. I mean, I have it here, I have it on the back wall, but having it on the board full time, as annoying as it sounds to me because it's the same schedule every day, it's almost more helpful to them. That way they can figure it out. And
I'll agree, because I have the same problem, is I have
Mhm.
students who do the same thing, and I have it on the board, and they still ask.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. Okay, the next part, well, did you have any questions about that portion? I mean, with the proximity, because I think you did a good job with that.
Yeah.
That was very helpful.
And like I said, a lot of that is like subconsciously. I don't realize that that's where I'm going is getting close, but a lot of them,
Just part of your routine.
yeah,
Part
and a
what
lot
you
of
do.
them do better with that one-on-one attention. I've noticed as freshmen, they're very needy is not necessarily the right word, but they're very much wanting that right answer, and they want you to come over and tell them, I know this is what you want me to do, this is what I need, can you tell me what it is? And so me coming over and talking to each one-on-one kind of gives them that validation of that answer that they're looking for. And so me coming over and doing that does a little bit better, whereas my juniors that I have first period, they're more of just tell me what the answer is. I don't care if you tell everybody or whatever's going on, but I just need the answer.
So it makes them feel valued, basically.
Yeah.
That they're getting something from you. It's not you just giving them the answer. They're giving some input, whether it's completely accurate or not, doesn't matter. That's what
Right.
they're
Right.
getting. Okay, and the next part, understanding and organizing subject matter for student learning. Here's part of what I saw, as I said,
Okay.
utilize the academic language to identify connections, academic content standards, background knowledge and instruction. Ms. Mastretti's use of transitions made for seamless movement from one task to another. You used, what was the verb, the verbiage you used, the word, mandrakes.
Oh yeah.
That was, you used mandrakes in that because they were not sure what that was. And then somebody said, oh yeah, I saw it in Harry Potter.
Mm-hmm.
So they had a connection, so at least that they had an idea of what it was when maybe most of them didn't. So that was valuable too.
Well, and one thing that they really struggle with is Shakespeare in general is difficult, and they get so hung up on the language being difficult, and it's not real. It doesn't happen to us. Like it's not. Everything that he's talking about isn't real to us. Well, no, mandrakes don't exist in real life, and you're not going to have this screaming plant coming out of the ground. But you see an author who also read Shakespeare at one point is now borrowing that idea and putting it into their everyday writing. So you can see that piece of it, and then trying to pull in, well, you guys have friends, and we talked about the plans at the beginning, and you guys have plans that end up going wrong. And so trying to make as many connections for them to where it's not something so crazy and out there helps a lot. And especially with something like Shakespeare, where it's not always easy and it's not something that they always understand, but having it to where they activate that prior knowledge piece. Some of them don't have it,
Correct.
which is, completely fine, and it's hard to understand, and it's hard to process always of like, what do you mean you haven't seen this? How do you not know about this? But at the same time, I have to think back to when I was in school and they're talking about different things, and I'm like, okay, I don't know what they're talking about.
Let's put it this way. I didn't know what a mandrake was. So
Yeah.
I learned something in class because I've
Yeah.
not used that in a...
Yeah. And so trying to figure out different ways, I know I have some kids that do like Harry Potter. I know I have some kids that are a little bit more on the fringe and out there. We've used Minecraft in class before, talking about they're building up something and how to get things set up. And so I have a couple kids that play Minecraft when they're done with their assignments. And so trying to figure out my students and then figure out what they would know, that helps me to understand what sort of
And
knowledge
the
they
prior
have.
knowledge is big because you'll find out if you got 2 out of 20 or 30 or 40, whatever you have in your class, or if it's 30 out of 40. So
Yeah.
it makes it easier to go to the next part because you don't have to explain it as much.
Absolutely.
And then you can also have them explain it to each other.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
that's helpful. Okay, the other part is, which I didn't see the whole assessment, like I said, you utilize Standard 5, assessing students for learning.
Okay.
So you utilize informal assessment with some of the questions and stuff you asked to see if they knew where they were with that, and if they had the plans, mandrakes, if they knew the background of that, and practice to gauge student learning and understanding. So then you did some assessment.
Yeah.
I didn't see that part, so I wanted to find out what you got from that.
Right. So I graded their guided notes. I did both. I graded their guided notes and then they took a quiz. Their guided notes were based on completion. Because we go over the answers so much, it's hard to grade for accuracy because I go over it with them first.
Okay.
So for the most part, it's based on completion. I had a couple that didn't turn it in, but it's my same couple that don't do anything. So I'm not too surprised. But looking at the quizzes themselves, my average score was a 14 out of 20. And I had 2 score an 18, but I didn't have any perfect scores. So this one had a couple more difficult questions, a little bit more true or false, which tends to kind of trip them up. It's hard. They would think that with only 2 options, it becomes a little bit easier. But when we talk about so much of it, and it's all over Act 4, they tend to get a little bit more confused because they're like, well, it was this way at the beginning. I'm like, right. But it's not that way in Act 4. And so that kind of caused some of them some confusion. But for the most part, everybody passed and did pretty decent. So that's a 70%. So
Yeah, right around there.
with my average score being about a 70, I'll take it.
Okay. So what would you do for those who scored on the lower end to make sure that they understood what was being taught?
Well, looking at my few students that scored lower than the 14, these are my ones that, from me watching them, they weren't paying attention in class. They are the ones playing on their tablets. They're the ones who are copying the work from other people. They're the ones who aren't physically doing the work. And so seeing their scores doesn't really surprise me because it doesn't. You can copy a lot and it probably makes sense, but at the same time, if you're not physically trying to do something or to figure it out, and figure out how to put it together, then they're missing some information.
Okay. So do you need to answer that? Do
Probably.
you think? Go ahead and answer that then.
Hello?